Greetings to those who watch below. Before we start today's video, I'd like to give a huge shout out and say a massive thank you to those who dwell below. Ghost City Shelton, Lefty Kim, Steffi Ray, Wicked Witch, Jess Black Curtain, Aztec Priest, and returning to below, Lisa Watts. Thank you so much. You guys really help the channel out so much, as does every single person who watches these videos. For today's stories, I'd like to try something different. Whether or not you believe that aliens visit this planet, there have been many people who state for a fact that they have been abducted by entities not of this earth. So sit back, relax, and enjoy these truly terrifying alien abduction encounters. My Life of Abductions by Mr. Throwaway 999. These happened to me from age 6 through to about my mid-30s. In my first encounter I was around the age of 6. I woke up to what you would call a grey alien in a shared bedroom with my 2 siblings who slept through it. I startled the creature and it ran or glided down the hallway and ran through my parents' closed bedroom door. Getting up, I opened the door and it wasn't in the room. It had vanished. Nobody else saw this encounter. Many additional encounters in the years followed. I've never spoken publicly about them before, for fear of ridicule. Through my teenage years, I don't remember any specific events. The next specific memories are around the age of 25, when I moved into a 3rd floor apartment. I remember the sound of the tiny shuffling feet coming down the hallway and then being completely unable to move. They came into my room and surrounded my bed. There were 4 or 5 smaller greys, and then 1 or 2 taller ones, who seemed to be directing the operation. There was no verbal interaction, but they made a sound like a clicking noise, which I assumed was them speaking to each other. They would touch a metal rod to my shoulder, and I would black out. Usually I would wake about 8 to 10 hours later, sometimes as much as 24 hours later. Once, I woke up locked outside on my back porch in my underwear at 2 in the morning. I have no memory of what happened during that time. My reaction in those days was of course terror, but also anger. I wanted to catch these buggers in the act, so I set up infrared alarms that would make a loud noise if anyone walked through the beam. They were never triggered. One time, I strung a wire at ankle level across the hallway to trip anyone that did not know it was there. I heard the shuffling feet approaching. Then, the sound of 5 or 6 creatures tumbling and falling on top of each other. A few seconds later, they burst into my room, and they were pissed off. They zapped me unconscious immediately. For a while, I was in a support group online, and we shared abduction stories. But other than that, I've not spoken about this publicly, even to my wife. At around age 30, I moved out of my apartment and back into my parents' house, and thought the encounters would stop. They didn't, but they changed quite a bit. At my parents' house, I was in a room on the 1st floor, and everyone else was upstairs. There were hardwood floors in the upstairs. Almost immediately upon moving back home, in the middle of the night I was awoken by the sound of what sounded like dozens of clawed feet shuffling on the wooden floors. At the same time, an eerie blue light filled the house, shining under the closed door, and there was a weird electrical buzzing sound. I remember the first time this happened, I reached for the door, and it was like someone shouted in my head, "Go to sleep." I immediately went to sleep, and don't recall anything after that. I recall numerous additional times when I awoke to 1 or more of them standing over my bed, or just awoke to the blue light but nothing specific. A few years later, I'm guessing around my mid-30s, I got my act together and moved back out. I rented the 2nd floor of a house, and another guy had the 3rd floor. We shared the 1st floor kitchen and common area. Again, I have numerous recollections of waking up to a blue light filling the room, and occasionally seeing them standing over me. Somewhere in this period, I believe they may have placed an implant in my leg. I woke with an unexplained scar, and all the hair shaved from one shin. About a year later, I woke up to them standing around me, and I remember the thought that was projected to me, "We're going to take it out now." And then I went unconscious. My upstairs roommate commented to me that one time he woke up and walked by my closed door, and he confirmed there was a blue light coming out from the edges of my door. So I guess that brings me up to the latest memories I have. As I said, in my mid-30s I was in my own place, and would still wake up to the blue light or the presence of these guys checking up on me. It happened less and less frequently, and by the time I moved out of that location and got married, it's tapered off and hardly happened at all. It's probably been at least 15 years since my last event, which is fine by me. Thanks for listening, and it feels good to get it out there. Even if you are a complete skeptic, it doesn't matter if you believe me or not. It all happened, and nothing can change that. A friend and I almost got abducted in Alaska, by Ganj Monj 2. In a city called Fairbanks, a friend and I were waiting in my best friend's mum's car, parked outside my best friend's brother's trailer. It was around 10 p.m. My best friend was inside talking to his brother about something, and I was just sitting in the back seat talking to my friend, who was in the passenger seat. He stuck his finger up to silence me, and said, "I think I see a UFO," and gave his full attention to the sky. I had to lean forward over the middle console to take a good look, but could only see 6 light sources floating in the sky. There were 4 lights that went leftwards around and around the outer edge of the saucer. A bigger red light followed by 3 white lights. The other 2 were extremely bright rays of white light, one directed towards the ground and one directed towards the sky. We got out of the car and walked forwards about 3 meters into the yard to get a better look. So at this point, I can actually kind of see inside the UFO. It was too bright to see anything in detail though. It was coming closer and closer directly towards us, so we got spooked. We ended up screaming. I ran to my best friend's brother's window and hit it with my hand, trying to get my best friend's attention. I looked in the window and pointed at the sky and yelled, "UFO! UFO!" I looked back at the UFO, and it was moving to the left and further away from me and my friend. At that point, its frame wasn't hidden by the clouds anymore. It was a classic flying saucer-shaped UFO. I think it understood that we were too afraid of getting abducted. After about 5 seconds of it moving away from us, it turned into light, then shrunk into a star shape and disappeared. I'm pretty sure it accelerated into warp speed. Can we see objects moving at faster than light speeds? Anyway, my best friend came out yelling at us because we woke up the dogs, and they started barking and woke up his brother's family. We told him what happened, but he said he didn't care because he was mad that we woke up his brother's family. It was a crazy experience. My Alien Encounter by AppalachianWind. This is the first time I've ever told this story to anyone outside my family. I'm leaving out the time and location and some other details because I'm still scared of what might happen with it publicly, I guess. The summer before I was in 8th grade, me and 2 of my friends snuck out at midnight to go walk around the neighbourhood and go see these girls on the next block who were having a sleepover. We turn a corner in our neighbourhood and there's this huge black blimp-shaped thing in the sky, like the pictures of the Hindenburg, but bigger than that, and as close, if not closer. It was completely silent, and the size of at least 4 to 5 football fields across. No exaggeration, even though I was young. We stare at it entranced, asking each other over and over if we see it, which we all agree that we do, standing there frozen in place. It was like black polished gunmetal. No lights, no sound, no anything. It's just hovering there. and then I don't know what happened, but time clearly jumps. The next thing I remember is that the craft or ship or government experiment, whatever the hell it was, has gone, and there's a tiny glowing white barbell thing in the sky, seemingly slowly moving to Earth with wisps of smoke coming off it. Then, 2 brand new black trucks with silver gearboxes on the back, like F-150s or S-10s but nicer, came speeding down the street, going about 70 in a residential 25-mile-per-hour neighbourhood. After that, I remember walking home to one of my friends' houses and going to bed. At that point it was like 5 or 6 a.m, and the sun was coming up. We all made a promise to tell my dad in the morning, because he worked for the city, but we never did. I don't know what happened later in life to one of my friends who was there, but the other was my best friend, and we sort of made an unspoken pact never to talk about it. I don't know how or why we did that. We all grew up, and I sort of lost touch with them too. We did reconnect over Facebook and such over the years, but it was like there was something between us that neither of us wanted to touch or talk about. Looking back on it now, there's no way that we could have been the only ones to see it. It wasn't that late at night, and it was over a heavily populated suburb of a major city. The idea of this has always scared me more than any sort of possible abduction that I may have gone through. That there were others, and we're all voluntarily suffering a sort of collective amnesia, except in how we're not. I've thought about hypnosis, but that scares me too. Plus, I'm not sure if I'd trust the results. I was just a kid then, and I'm not sure if I could trust the hypnotist. What I do know is that there's no way that it was just the 3 of us who saw it. We're talking about a huge thing hovering in the sky directly above hundreds of houses just after midnight on a summer weekend. But nothing was on the news, nothing in the paper, nothing on TV. No word spoken about it again, ever, by anyone. Lisa's Story, by Anonymous. My mum tells a story of her and her friend, who we will call Lisa. When my mum and Lisa were teenagers, they were up on the roof of Lisa's house, and they see a bright light in the sky. The next thing they know, the light has gone. The thing is, they thought that they'd been on the roof for like 15 minutes, but 3 hours had passed. Mum doesn't remember anything about what happened during that time, and Lisa simply refuses to talk about it. She would just answer my mum with things like, "I don't know," and just drop it, for a long time. So, a couple of months later, my mum moves away and loses contact with Lisa for about 10 years. She finally meets up with her again, and immediately notices that something is odd about Lisa. Lisa appeared very distant to her, with a very dreamy demeanour, like she was really happy and at peace, for no good reason. After they talk for a bit, Lisa brings up the incident on the roof. Mum says she still doesn't really remember anything about it, but Lisa remembers. She remembers everything. She said that at first it was all in bits and pieces, and she couldn't remember any of it clearly. She was confused and scared, and wanted to avoid discussing it. Then, as time passed, she began to remember more of it. She remembers it all clearly, and she remembers the other 3 times that she was abducted after that pretty clearly as well. At first they paralysed her, and did all sorts of invasive experiments on her, but by the most recent time, they'd stopped probing her, and began to talk with her. They didn't speak English or any human language, but she could understand everything they said, even though she can't speak their language herself. Apparently they told her all sorts of things, stuff about space, Earth itself, and most shockingly, predicted years beforehand that she would get pregnant in a specific year, and it would also be a stillborn, and that she would never be able to have children again. They also told her that it was not their fault, and they even made an attempt to save her from this fate, but they were unsuccessful. They also told her that they had abducted my mother, another time after that first incident. Mum says she has no recollection of any other potential abductions, but she does have recurring nightmares of being abducted, but she's almost sure that they're just that, nightmares. Anyway, Lisa tells Mum that every time she speaks with them, she comes to understand the truth more and more. When Mum inquires what the truth is, Lisa just says that you'll know eventually, and she says that once she learned of the truth, then everything became wonderful. Mum has seen her a few more times over the years, and she apparently has a pretty normal life, and doesn't obsess over alien stuff. She only ever brings it up in passing, not like it's a central part of her daily life. A Drive Home by Anonymous. I was driving home for the weekend from school at Indiana University. It takes me about 2 hours to get home, and I left Bloomington around 10 p.m. At exactly 10:53, I'm on a rural stretch of the 2-lane highway I take home, and I notice what appeared to be flashing lights behind me. I thought, great, I'm getting pulled over. So I turned onto the next country road about a quarter mile from where I noticed the lights. As the car came to a stop, and I started to open my glove box to get out my registration and proof of insurance, the lights suddenly disappeared, and no car drove past. Now here is where the story takes a turn for the weird, and I'm sure you guys will think I'm just making it all up, because it really does seem like something straight out of a typical UFO movie. The electronics in my car started to go haywire. The radio was randomly changing stations, while the volume kept going up and down, while the dome light and headlights started to flicker and turn off and back on. This was at 10:56. I start thinking to myself that my battery must be failing, or else I have a short somewhere in the electrical system of my car. So, I lean down to pop the hood so I can take a look at the battery, and that's the last thing I remember doing. The next thing I know, I open my eyes and see nothing but the night sky, full of bright stars. It was a cold night, and it seemed like I had never seen stars that bright in my entire life. I sat up and looked around, and saw absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. I was in the middle of a field, surrounded by corn stalks left over from the recent harvest. As I started to come to my senses, I started to freak out. Where am I? Why the fuck am I asleep in the middle of the field? Where the fuck's my car? I got up and started walking toward the distant headlights I could see from a road about half a mile away. When I got to the nearest intersection, I looked at the signs, which read 350 north and 50 west. I was half a mile away from my car, which was just right off the main road. I started walking towards the headlights I could see on the main road. I can't say how long it took me to walk the half mile, but it couldn't have been more than 10 or 15 minutes. When I arrived at my car, all the lights were out. My battery had died, which struck me as odd because I couldn't have been gone for that long. I looked to my phone, which was sitting on the passenger seat, and the time was 2:17 a.m. Over 3 hours had passed since I turned off onto the side road for the flashing lights behind me. I remember sitting in my car, completely dumbfounded, wondering what the hell had just happened to me. After about half an hour of just sitting there, I remembered that my battery was dead, so I got on the phone and called AAA to come and give me a jump. It took about an hour for them to get out to me, since I was a good distance away from the nearest town, during which time I just sat in silence, running through the possible scenarios in my head concerning what just happened. To this day, I couldn't tell you what really happened to me that night. All I know is I can't think of any plausible explanation as to why I woke up over half a mile away from my car, in the middle of a cornfield more than 3 hours after I had stopped. I've only shared this story with one other person, my uncle, I am sure people would either look at me like I'm crazy, or they would call bullshit on the whole story. And I can't blame them. If somebody came to me with a story like that so closely mirrors the stereotypical encounter story, I probably wouldn't believe them either. Hi guys, thank you so much for listening to today's video. I do hope you enjoyed it. Aliens are a new subject that I'm thinking of branching out into, so this is kind of a test to see what you guys think. If you want to hear more alien stories, please let me know in the comments section below. So, until next time, sleep tight.